Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Pallavi Vishwanath from Bombay, and today we will be talking about puberty. Let us understand what puberty is. The agenda of today's presentation would be to understand what is puberty, physical and hormonal changes in puberty, what is delayed puberty and the differential diagnosis of delayed puberty, and how to evaluate a case of delayed puberty. What is puberty? Let's understand the term. It is the physiological transition from childhood to the reproductive maturity. Puberty refers to the biological changes and the sexual maturation that occur during the transition from childhood to adulthood. Although the timing, sequence, and the pace of pubertal maturation vary amongst all individuals, the sentinel events follow a predictable pattern. Now, there are several factors which influence this pubertal process, the development of the puberty. They are genetics, race, geographic location, exposure to light, nutritional status, various environmental factors, excessive exercise, and psychological factors. There are 5 stages of development in girls in puberty. Acceleration of growth is the first sign in most adolescent girls. First, there is adrenarche, that is the adrenal androgen secretion. This leads to pubarche, appearance of pubic hair. Then gonadarche, activation of the hypothalamo-pituitary gonadal axis. Telarche, appearance of the breast tissue. And menarche, that is onset of menses. Girls usually undergo this process in 18 months, whereas boys takes 5 years. Now, what do these stages actually mean? Adrenarche is the activation of the adrenal androgen secretion from the adrenal glands that begins before puberty, and this ultimately stimulates pubarche, that is the appearance of pubic hair. Gonadarche describes the activation of the entire hypothalamo-pituitary gonadal axis. This is what stimulates the growth spurt and in turn stimulates telarche. Telarche is the appearance of breast tissue and thereon proper development of breast. And menarche, as we all know, is the onset of menses. What exactly happens during adrenarche? It is the term used to describe the increase in the adrenal androgen production that begins at around 5.5 to 6 years of age. It is independent of maturation of the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis, but the two are often commonly used together. The best indicator of adrenarche is a blood test to get a serum DHEAS concentration levels. A level more than 40 microgram per deciliter, which is higher than the normally seen in children of 1 to 5 years of age, indicates that adrenarche has started. The primary stimulus for adrenarche is unknown. Steady increase in adrenal androgen secretion after adrenarche ultimately stimulates pubarche, as we had already discussed earlier. Adrenarche generally precedes activation of this entire axis by around 2 to 3 years. Pubertal growth process. A good proportion of the adult height, that is about 20%, is gained during puberty. The pubertal growth spurt occurs approximately 2 years earlier in girls than in boys, and peak height velocity is reached approximately 6 months before menarche. The bone mass accumulation during puberty is critical to the development of the peak bone mass, which is a major determinant for developing osteoporosis in later life. In girls, the peak velocity in bone mineral accretion, that is, bone mineral accretion is the change in the bone mineral density. This occurs at menarche, approximately 9 to 12 months after the peak height velocity has attained. What are the various hormones that govern this process of growth? Mainly, they are growth hormone, IGF-1, and the sex steroids. Growth hormone, GH, is secreted in a pulsatile fashion. At the onset of puberty, growth hormone amplitude increases and concentrations rise progressively. The rate of increase in the circulating growth hormone level is the most important determinant of the pubertal growth rate. The IGF-1 levels rise 7-fold from very low concentrations at birth to peak values at puberty, and then fall rapidly after puberty, and by 20 they decrease by 50% and thereby decline slowly with advancing age. The pubertal growth spurt is stimulated primarily by increase in the GH, growth hormone, and IGF-1 levels, but sex steroids also play an important role. The pubertal growth spurt is mediated by a sex steroid induced increase in the growth hormone secretion. Normal pubertal development requires combined action of both sex steroids and growth hormone. Ultimately, the sex steroids limit adult height by regulating the epiphyseal fusion. What happens at telarchy? How do we understand telarchy? The staging systems used most frequently to describe the physical changes of puberty were given by Marshall and Tanner. The Tanner stages describe the secondary sexual characters in both girls and boys. In girls, the breast and pubic hair development, and in boys, the pubic hair and the genital development. Let us understand the Tanner stages of breast here. Breast development follows a recognized sequence of events. In Tanner stage 1, there is no breast development, like prepubertal. Tanner stage 2, breast budding is distinguished by enlargement and the widening of the areola. In stage 3, the breast enlarges further, becoming elevated beyond the areola. In stage 4, the breast enlarges even more, and the areola and the nipple form a secondary mold on the breast tissue. In stage 5, this secondary mold regresses into the breast tissue and the breast achieves a adult contour. The Tanner staging of puberty. Stage 1, there is no pubic hair. In stage 2, it is distinguished by the emergence of small amount of long but relatively straight hair on the labia majora. Stage 3, the hair then become curly, coarse and extend outwards. Stage 4, the hair extends further to cover the labia. In stage 5, it assumes an adult pattern, also extending on the medial part of the thigh. This is a pictographical diagrammatic representation of the breast and Tanner staging. You can go through stage by stage. It is very well depicted as to how the stages evolve. Sorry. Yeah. And the Tanner staging of the male genital appearance. In stage 1, in males, the testicular volume is less than 3 ml. Stage 2, the testicular volume is less than 3 ml, but there is a change in the texture of the scrotal skin. Stage 3, there is increase in the size of the penis with further testicular enlargement. Stage 4, further enlargement of the penis and testicles with development of the glans penis. Stage 5, it assumes an adult size and shape. Milestones of puberty. Menarche occurs over an average duration of 2 years and 6 months after the onset of puberty and after the peak of growth has passed. On an average, the pubertal sequence of accelerated growth, telarchy, puberty, and menarche requires around 4 to 5 years. Development during puberty. As discussed, this typically lasts for around 2 to 5 years. In girls, occurs around 9 to 13 years of age, and boys 11 to 14 years of age. It has been found that higher weight and body fat mass are associated with an increased likelihood of early menarche. Early pubertal development is associated with slightly decreased adult height and increased risk for obesity compared to late menarche. What are the various physical and hormonal changes that occur in a person's body at puberty? Let us discuss the physical changes first. There is increase in the overall height of the person. The long bones of the arms and legs elongate. There is change in the voice. Boys develop a deep and a hoarse voice, whereas girls develop a high-pitched voice. Change in the body shape. In boys, the shoulders become broader, the chest becomes wider, whereas in girls, the region below the waist becomes wide. Muscles grow in both boys and girls, but more prominently in boys. There is increased activity of sweat and sebaceous glands. This is why you would have noticed that children undergoing this puberty in the transition have a lot of acne outbursts on the skin. There is increase in acne. Development of sex organs. In boys, the testes and the penis develop completely and spermatogenesis starts to occur. In girls, ovaries matures and ovulation starts to take place. They also reach a certain mental maturity. The brain attains a great capacity for learning, intellectual maturity, and also emotional maturity. An increase in the self-awareness, self-consciousness, and self-appraisal develops. Peak height velocity precedes the onset of menarche. Extremities grow faster than the trunk and head. Full adult height develops by 17 to 18 years in girls and around 20 to 21 in boys. There is growth of secondary sexual characters in girls like telarchy, pubarchy, and adrenarchy. Secondary sexual characters in boys are the increase in the growth of facial hair in the form of beard and mustache. There's a growth of chest and axillary hair as well. The changes in other genital organs of girls are mons pubis and labia majora and minora increase in size. The vaginal length increases, appearance of rugae, thickening of epithelium, and the pH becomes more acidic. The uterus to cervix ratio becomes 2 is to 1 as the uterus enlarges during this period. This is a good diagrammatic representation of the various physical and hormonal changes that occur during puberty. Like you can see from head to toe, there's acne, underarm hair development, telarchy, that is the breast development. In female, there's a rounded body contour below the waist, pubic hair development, enlargement of the uterus, clitoris, and labia, and finally menarche. In males, there is acne, beard and mustache development, changes in the voice, again axillary and chest hair development, muscle, broadening of the shoulder, muscle development, pubic hair development, enlargement of the penis, scrotum, and testes, and ejaculation. What adolescent minds go through. That period, the transition period of puberty is, all of us have gone through that, and we can understand that our mind is in a constant state of turmoil, a lot emotional roller coaster ride, and a lot of thoughts going on in your mind. That's a lot of mood swings, self-centeredness, cognitive skills, emotional, intellectual development, individuality. We start understanding who we are. So a lot of changes that occur in our minds during puberty. What are the hormonal changes which take place during puberty? First, I would like to begin by saying we will the main four organs we need, three places we need to concentrate over here: hypothalamus, pituitary, and the sex organs. These three are the things we'll be mainly talking about. The hypothalamus, anterior pituitary gland, and the gonads of the fetus, neonate, infant, and prepubertal child are all capable of secreting hormones in the adult concentrations. The understanding of the hypothalamo-pituitary gonadal axis is important, is the key to understand the endocrinology of puberty. Let us understand this axis. What happens to this axis and how it is during various stages of our life. During fetal life and infancy, the HPO or the hypothalamo-pituitary gonadal axis becomes functional even before birth. Development of this hypothalamo-pituitary portal venous system begins by 9 to 10 weeks of gestation and completed by 20 weeks of gestation. FSH and LH pituitary concentrations increase progressively and reach a peak at 20 to 24 weeks. After birth, the steroid hormones fall sharply due to the loss of the maternal and placental hormones. This is at fetal life and infancy. During childhood and early adolescence, the interval between infancy and puberty is known as the juvenile pause. The prevailing theory to explain the juvenile pause envisions a hypothalamic gonadostat controlling the level of sensitivity to the central negative feedback actions of gonadal steroids. However, a lot of observations demonstrated that steroid hormone feedbacks affects the amount but not the pattern of gonadotropic secretion, thereby contradicting our original traditional gonadostat theory. The typical diphasic pattern of gonadotropin secretion from infancy to puberty results primarily from changing levels of central inhibition of pulsatile GnRH secretion and to a lesser extent from high sensitivity to low levels of gonadal steroid feedback. What happens to this axis at puberty? Around 1 year before puberty, breastfeeding in the prepubertal girls, the nocturnal pulses of gonadotropin secretion changes with the LH levels exceeding those of FSH. The LH peak rises around 10-fold, whereas the FSH pulse amplitude only rises 2 times, that it doubles, resulting in a decrease in the serum FSH to LH ratio. The gonadotropin pulses become diurnal and the duration of the increase in the estradiol becomes more prolonged. In response to this increase in the gonadotropin secretion, the basal estradiol level also increases, and inhibin B, which was undetectable in the prepubertal girls, increases sharply in mid-puberty. Inhibin A, which was undetectable in early puberty, increases gradually and reaches an adult level during menarche. Menarche occurs in late puberty. We have now understood the axis and what this means and the various components of the axis. Now, regulation of the hypothalamo-hypophyseal gonadal axis. GnRH, that is the gonadotropin releasing hormone, is responsible for the gonadotropin secretion from the pituitary gland. The gonadotropins are the FSH and LH. GnRH is secreted by the neurons in the basal forebrain and extending from the olfactory bulbs to the medial hypothalamus. The GnRH stimulates the release of FSH and LH from pituitary. This in turn stimulates the gonads. The LH and FSH have negative feedback on the hypothalamus, whereas the testosterone and the androstenedione produced by the testes and estradiol produced by the ovary inhibit both the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. Inhibin, activin, and follistatin also have feedback effects at both the levels. The GnRH secretion by the hypothalamus is under the control of various central and peripheral signals. Under the central signals are the excitatory amino acids and other neurotransmitters like GABA, neuropeptide Y, glutamate, and kisspeptins. Under peripheral signals, we have nutrition and other related hormones like leptin, insulin, growth hormone, IGF-1, inhibin, activin, and follistatin. Now let us discuss these in detail. The central control mechanisms involved in the regulation of this axis, which in turn govern the pubertal development. The factors modulating the activity of hypothalamo-pituitary gonadal axis includes various neurotransmitters and peptides. Let's discuss the important ones among them, and I'll put it in easy words, which is inhibitory and which activates the process. Gamma aminobutyric acid, that is GABA. This is an inhibitory neurotransmitter to the axis. Neuropeptide Y is an important component of the biological brake that restrains the GnRH pulse generator, as in this acts as an inhibitory component. Glutamate, this is an excitatory neurotransmitter, and it may play a role in the resurgence of the pulsatile GnRH secretion at the onset of puberty. Kisspeptins, hypothalamic kisspeptin GPR54 signaling is the key component that triggers the onset of puberty. Kisspeptins act as a fuel for the hypothalamic GnRH pulse generator, as in the pulse to increase the pulse frequency of GnRH. These were the central controlling mechanisms. Now let us talk about the peripheral controlling mechanisms. Leptin, the first hormone, that is leptin, secreted by adipocytes, activates the hypothalamo-pituitary gonadal axis. Leptin was recently shown to suppress NPY, that is neuropeptide Y expression in the arcuate nucleus. This NPY stimulates appetite and has an inhibitory effect on the gonadotropin axis and is involved with the inhibition of puberty in conditions of food restriction. The rise in the level of leptin would suppress NPY and in turn release the inhibitory effect of NPY neurons on the GnRH LH FSH axis, allowing the initiation of the puberty. On the other hand, there might be a direct peripheral negative effect of leptin on the gonadal function. In adolescents of both the sexes, a gradual rise in the serum leptin levels before puberty signals the central nervous system to support and trigger puberty. This was about leptin. Inhibin, activin, and follistatin. Inhibin and follistatin inhibit. See, like the name suggests, inhibin inhibits, follistatin, static, to stop. So both of these inhibit, whereas activin stimulates the expression, biosynthesis, and secretion of FSH. They are mainly secreted by the gonads. Other hormones like growth hormone, insulin like growth factor 1, and its major binding protein, that is the IGF binding protein 3, normally rise at puberty. The increase in the growth hormone and IGF-1 concentrations is probably responsible for most of the metabolic changes that we see during puberty. Inhibin, activin, and follistatin are very important to understand how they help in the peripheral signaling mechanisms. So let us understand them in a bit more detail. Inhibin is a family of peptides that is synthesized by the granulosa cells in response to FSH. They act as autocrine paracrine regulators of HPO axis. Inhibin, as we've understood, is an important inhibitor of FSH secretion. Two forms of inhibin are there broadly, that is inhibin A and inhibin B. Both the forms have identical alpha subunit but dissimilar beta subunit. The two forms are inhibin A, alpha beta A, inhibin B, alpha beta B. Like the name is suggesting, the beta subunit is different in both of them. During the menstrual cycle, the FSH stimulates the secretion of inhibin from granulosa cells and in turn suppressed by inhibin. This is the reciprocal relationship between FSH and inhibin. Inhibin B is predominantly secreted in the follicular phase of the cycle. GnRH and the epidermal growth factor diminish the inhibin secretion, whereas the IGF-1 enhances the inhibin production. Inhibin B rises in a pulsatile fashion, reaching a peak in the early and the mid follicular phases and decreases in the late follicular phase before ovulation and reaches a nadir in the mid luteal phase. With the formation of the corpus luteum in the luteal phase of menstrual cycle, the inhibin expression changes from B form to A form. The circulating levels of inhibin A rise in the late follicular phase to reach a peak at the mid luteal phase. Inhibin has an inhibitory effect on the gonadotropin secretion. Inhibin can block the synthesis and secretion of FSH, prevent upregulation of the GnRH receptors, and reduce the number of GnRH receptors. This is a graphical representation of inhibin A and inhibin B during levels during the menstrual cycle. Like you can see, the inhibin B is represented by a blue line. It begins to rise in the follicular phase, early follicular phase, reaches a peak in the increases in the early follicular phase, drops just before ovulation, and after ovulation peaks and then gradually falls down in the late follicular phase. Whereas inhibin A, which is represented by the black dotted line, like you can see, it does not increase in the follicular phase. It does not increase after ovulation takes place, gradually increases in the mid and late follicular phase and then reaches a nadir. This was about inhibin. Activin. Activin is derived from granulosa cells and also present in pituitary gonadotrophs. Activin has two subunits known as activin A, activin B. The variants of beta subunits are designated as beta C, beta D, and beta E. The three forms of activin are activin A, beta A, beta A, activin AB, beta A, beta B, activin B, beta AB, and beta B. We don't have, like, the details of the names are not required. I just wanted to tell you the various forms of the activin. What does activin do? Activin augments the secretion of FSH and inhibits prolactin, ACTH, and growth hormone responses. The effects of activin are blocked by inhibin and follistatin. Pituitary secretion of FSH is significantly regulated by activin and inhibin. Coming to follistatin. This is a glycopeptide secreted by a variety of pituitary cells and gonadotrophs. It functions locally in the ovarian follicles and also in the pituitary. This peptide is also known as the FSH suppression protein because of its main action, inhibition of FSH synthesis and secretion, and FSH response to GnRH by binding to activin and decreasing its activity. Activin stimulates follistatin production and inhibin prevents this response. Follistatin plays a role by inhibiting activin and enhancing inhibin activity. These words might sound very confusing, but it's very easy to understand. Don't worry about that. Within the ovarian follicle, activin and inhibin influence growth and development by modulating the theca and granulosa responses to the gonadotrophs. This is a pictographic flowchart of the various mechanisms which regulate puberty, which we've understood so far. Like discussed earlier, the KIS1 peptins act as a major signaling component for the activation of the HPO axis and puberty. This KIS1 neuron activation in the arcuate nucleus thereby stimulates the GnRH neurons in the medial eminence. This leads to an increase in the hypothalamic GnRH pulses. This increase in the GnRH pulse frequency stimulates the release of FSH and LH from pituitary, thereby stimulating the gonadal sex steroid secretion, which leads to the pubertal growth and development. Pubertal maturation of the hypothalamo-hypophyseal gonadal axis. Now, what exactly happens to this axis in puberty? This axis undergoes an active phase during fetal and neonatal development and then enters a resting phase that we had discussed, the juvenile pause, that lasts from the rest of the childhood until puberty. Puberty begins with an activation of the hypothalamo-pituitary gonadal system. Changes in the GnRH pulsatility during puberty are reflected by peripheral LH and FSH levels. The qualitative and quantitative changes in the LH secretion resulting from the pulsatile GnRH secretion occur approximately 2 years before the appearance of the secondary sexual characters. At puberty, the LH pulsatile secretion is characterized by a 28-fold increase in the pulse amplitude, whereas pulse frequency increases only 1.8-fold. During the prepubertal years, both LH and FSH secretions are preponderant during nighttime. In the peripubertal period, the secretion of gonadotropins increases during the sleep, and stimulation with exogenous GnRH shows an enhanced release of LH from pituitary. And this might be useful in differentiating a pubertal from a prepubertal response. Throughout puberty, the gonadotropin pulses keep increasing and become apparent during the daytime also. Now, this is a timeline representing the factors which govern the puberty. On the x-axis, we have the chronological age. On the y-axis, we have the LH pulsatile activity. Various genetic, mental, and endocrine metabolic factors, like we had discussed earlier, the factors influencing puberty, play a role. And at puberty, here before, I'm so sorry, until the end of neonatal period, the HPO axis is active, like we can see in the graph. It's active. After the neonatal period, the curve is slowly falling down. That is, this is a juvenile pause. Now, just before puberty, with the proper synchronization of the HPO axis, adrenarche, tularche, pubarche, and menarche takes place. Any change in the entire sequence of events leads to delayed puberty or partial puberty or absent puberty. I'll just summarize the pubertal events. The HPO axis, or in case of girls, or the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis in both the genders, differentiates and develops during the fetal life and becomes fully functional before birth. But until childhood, this axis is inactive because the pulsatile secretion of GnRH is suppressed to very low levels by the central inhibitory mechanisms, and also due to the low gonadal steroid feedback. In the late childhood, the adrenal androgen production increases, which is adrenarche. This androgen production rises and ultimately stimulates pubarche, that is the growth of pubic and axillary hair. After a decade of quiescence, the pulsatile GnRH secretion increases and the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis is reactivated. This is gonadarche in response to the metabolic signals from the periphery. The FSH and LH levels rise moderately before 10 years of age, followed by a gradual increase in estradiol, which stimulates the breast development, that is telarche. Rapid increase in the skeletal growth, that is the growth spurt, that precedes telarche and pubarche. This is mediated primarily by sex steroid-induced growth hormone secretion. This stimulates increased production of IGF-1 by the direct effects of increasing sex steroid concentrations. Rising levels of sex steroid limit adult height by stimulating epiphyseal fusion. At mid-puberty, the gonadal estrogen production increases to stimulate endometrial proliferation, thereby leading to menarche. So far, we have understood what is puberty, the various factors governing puberty, physical changes taking place in puberty, the hormonal changes, and understanding of the entire HPO axis. What are the central and peripheral signaling mechanisms which govern this axis, and what happens at puberty. Now this was the normal physiology. Now we will talk about a pathological aspect of puberty. What is delayed puberty? Absent or incomplete sexual maturation by the age of which 95% of children of the same sex have started their pubertal development. This is delayed puberty. The endocrine definition is delayed puberty is defined as the absence of signs of puberty in healthy girls by 13 years and in healthy boys by 13 and a half years of age. That is 2 standard deviations above the mean age at the start of puberty. Pediatric definition: delayed puberty is defined as the absence of signs of sexual maturation by an age more than 2 to 2.5 standard deviation values above the mean of that population. Why does this happen? Delayed puberty results from hypogonadism, which in turn can result from inactive hypothalamic pituitary axis, that is hypogonadotropic hypogonadism, or from a primary gonadal failure, that is hypergonadotropic hypogonadism. Most common cause of hypogonadotropic hypogonadism is constitutional delay. It is caused due to GnRH deficiency. This is a tabular form of a differential diagnosis of delayed puberty. Like we have discussed, we can broadly divide it into hypergonadotropic, hypogonadotropic, and eugonadism. Hypergonadotropic accounts to about 43 to 45% of cases of delayed puberty. In hypergonadotropic hypogonadism, we have ovarian failure with an abnormal karyotype, ovarian failure with normal karyotype. Coming to hypogonadotropic hypogonadism, there are two kinds of this. There is reversible form and irreversible form. Under the reversible form is the physiological delay, which happens to be the most common: anorexia nervosa or any eating disorders, primary hypothyroidism, congenital adrenal hyperplasia, Cushing syndrome, and prolactinoma. Under the irreversible causes, we have GnRH deficiency, hypopituitarism, congenital central nervous system defects, pituitary tumors and adenomas, craniopharyngioma, and malignant pituitary tumors. Under eugonadism, we have Mullerian agenesis, various developmental defects of the tract like vaginal septum, imperforate hymen, androgen insensitivity syndrome, and inappropriate positive feedback. That was a tabular form. Now we will discuss we'll just classify the causes compartment wise. Constitutional delay being the most common cause. Hypothalamus, it can be idiopathic, Kalman syndrome, functional cause, anorexia, stress, excessive exercise, or any damage by tumor. Pituitary, hyperprolactinoma can be the cause in pituitary, damage by radiation or surgery, compression by any other CNS tumor, empty sella syndrome, or inappropriate development is hypoplasia of pituitary. Ovarian cause, gonadal dysgenesis like Turner syndrome or mosaic Turner, PCOS in very early stage before menarche, and primary ovarian insufficiency. Uterovaginal cause like MRKH syndrome, endometrial receptor defect. Adrenal cause, that is congenital adrenal hyperplasia and tumor. Thyroid, in thyroid we have juvenile hypothyroidism. Miscellaneous causes are 5-alpha reductase deficiency, testicular feminization syndrome, chronic diseases like liver and kidney diseases or end-stage organ failures, systemic illnesses like Crohn's, cystic fibrosis, and sickle cell anemia. How do we evaluate a case of delayed puberty, and when to evaluate a case of delayed puberty? Following both the definitions that we've discussed before, in girls, the first evaluation should be done not later than 13 years of age. In delayed puberty, counseling is of utmost importance because the patient and the parents are very anxious as to why this is happening. So proper counseling is very much required. The child and the parents have to be fully informed and reassured that an underlying pathological process is rare and that the delay of the onset is usually due to a benign cause, and that it will come back to the normal timeline. In most of the recommendations, a precise diagnostic evaluation is recommended in girls with persisting absence of the onset of puberty at 14 and a half years of age. Initial evaluation and medical history. First of all, first step is initial evaluation, in which we would like to take a careful history, a physical examination, a thorough physical examination, and measurement of the bone age. Step 2, medical history. What exactly should we ask the patient, the child, and the parents? Whether pubertal development has not yet started or it has begun and then stopped. Careful evaluation of the previous growth pattern. What are the dietary habits and exercise is the child doing any rigorous form of any exercise? History of any anosmia. Anosmia is the lack of sense of smell. Previous serious illness, if any. History of any medication intake, any headache, visual disturbances, dyskinesia, seizures, and mental retardation. Those with constitutional delay typically exhibit delayed growth, adrenarche, and sexual development associated with declining growth velocity and delayed skeletal maturation. Delayed puberty can be among the first clinical indication of an underlying metabolic disorder, such as an inflammatory bowel disease, hypothyroidism, or any organ failure. A complete family history with emphasis on the age and pubertal milestone in older siblings and parents also provides useful information. In most patients with constitutional delay, other family members will have a similar history. So it's very important to ask if the child has any siblings, how has their growth process been, have they attained puberty at a normal age? All of these questions have to be asked. Physical examination, what exactly needs to be checked? The height, the weight, arm span, and Tanner staging of breast and pubic hair development. Height should be compared to norms for age and bone age, and carefully monitored for the next 6 months. Any unicoid body habitus, if present, that is arm span more than 5 centimeters, suggests this. suggest delayed epiphyseal closure due to hypogonadism. In the presence of breast budding, that is Tanner stage 2, a normal spontaneous puberty generally can be expected and the patient can be reassured. Various congenital malformations like midline defects and skeletal abnormalities like cleft lip, cleft palate, or scoliosis suggest a congenital GnRH deficiency resulting from genetic mutations involving elements of fibroblast growth factor signaling the pathway. A fundoscopic examination should be performed to evaluate the visual fields. Measurement of bone age should be obtained to compare with the chronological age and for assessment of future growth potential. Patients with constitutional delay of puberty typically exhibit a bone age of between 12 and 13 and a half years of age, which generally does not progress further without exposure to gonadal steroids that is required for the epiphyseal closure. Coming to the laboratory evaluation and imaging. The lab evaluation of girls with delayed puberty is aimed first at differentiating whether it is hypergonadotropic hypogonadism or hypogonadotropic hypogonadism, which can typically be accomplished by measuring the serum FSH, LH, and the estradiol concentrations. Further lab examinations we will discuss. There are three types of hypogonadism, as told earlier. Hypogonadotropic hypogonadism. In this, the primary defect is in the hypothalamus or the pituitary. Gonadotropins are low and estrogen is also low. Hypergonadotropic hypogonadism is the one in which the primary defect is in the ovary. That means there is no problem in the hypothalamus and the pituitary, because of which the gonadotropins are higher actually, because they want to stimulate the ovary, but because of the ovarian defect in the ovary, the estrogen is low. The eugonadotropic hypogonadism, the site can be variable. The cause can be at any site. Gonadotropin and estrogen levels are generally normal. Hypogonadotropic hypogonadism is found in 31% of the cases, hypergonadotropic in 43%, and eugonadotropic is contributes to about 25 to 26% of the causes. Specific approach to hypergonadotropic and hypogonadotropic hypogonadism will be discussed in the coming slides. Now, what is the role of FSH in evaluation of delayed puberty? If any girl comes to you with delayed puberty in the OPD, I think the first test we can go for is a serum FSH level. The serum FSH will either be normal, high, or low. In case of a normal or slightly below normal levels of FSH, it is usually constitutional delay of growth in puberty. In case of high FSH levels, it is hypergonadotropic hypogonadism, which is the primary defect is in the ovary. Get a karyotyping done. Accordingly, the cause it has to be worked up and cause has to be treated. In cases of low FSH level, check if the patient has any anosmia. If yes, points towards Kallmann syndrome. If no, a further workup has to be done. Excuse me. So sorry. Yeah. Hypogonadotropic hypogonadism. Measurement of serum prolactin is indicated to identify those with hyperprolactinemia. Hyperprolactinemia can result from excessive secretion from a pituitary lactotroph adenoma or from a hypothalamic or a pituitary tumor. Hyperprolactinoma is an indication for imaging by MRI, except when it can be confidently attributed to medicines. The serum TSH and free T4 levels are also measured to look for primary and secondary hypothyroidism. A serum DHEAS concentration is done to distinguish constitutional delay of puberty from congenital GnRH deficiency. And other lab investigations like a complete blood count, erythrocyte sedimentation rate, ESR, the LFTs and KFT, liver function test and kidney function test should be performed. A pelvic ultrasonography should be done to determine the presence or absence of a uterus in the girls. A head MRI should be obtained in patients with hypogonadotropic hypogonadism and in those with neurological signs and symptoms. Coming to hypergonadotropic hypogonadism. A karyotype should be obtained in all girls with hypergonadotropic hypogonadism to detect chromosomal abnormalities, except when a history of previous chemotherapy or gonadal radiation provides an obvious explanation. The most common disorder of this type is gonadal dysgenesis, with Turner syndrome 45XO being the prototype. A karyotype is a must, as this will identify the patients having Y chromosome, that is 46XY androgen insensitivity syndrome or Swyer syndrome. in whom gonadectomy is indicated because this gonad having the Y chromosome has a risk for malignant transformation with occult testicular elements. In patients with hypergonadotropic hypogonadism with a normal karyotype, that is 46XX, the possibility of 17 hydroxylase deficiency should be kept in mind. Just a flowchart to discuss about hypergonadotropic hypogonadism. In case of any delayed breast and pubic hair development, we'll get a bone age by X-ray wrist, FSH, LH, and estradiol levels. This will tell us if it is a hypergonadotropic type or a hypogonadotropic. If it is hypergonadotropic, we proceed with the karyotype. In hypogonadotropic hypogonadism, a head MRI, other tests like CBC, ESR, LFT, RFT, prolactin, thyroid tests, and DHEAS, serum concentration. This is a broad flowchart as to how to segregate hypergonadotropic from hypogonadotropic. Evaluation of a 16-year-old girl for pubertal development. Now, we have a 16-year-old girl with complaints of delayed puberty coming to our OPD. How should we proceed? As discussed earlier, and also I've told that the first test that should be performed is a serum FSH, LH, and estradiol to differentiate between hypogonadotropic and hypergonadotropic hypogonadism. Stepwise evaluation I will discuss in the form of a flowchart. Now, if a girl has come with delayed puberty, first of all, thorough history, physical examination, any family history of delayed puberty, history of chronic diseases, cryptorchidism, anosmia, anorexia, or any chemotherapy or radiotherapy for cancer treatment. After finding out this history, the first line investigations we will do are basic serum FSH, LH, estradiol levels, Tanner's staging of the secondary sexual characteristics of the boy or the girl, and biochemistry serum test as told. IGF-1 also should be done, TSH and free T4 and testosterone levels in boys, and X-ray wrist to determine the bone age to compare with the chronological age. Once these basic tests have been done, if there is an elevated FSH in girls after 13 years or in boys after 14 years, this indicates hypergonadotropic hypogonadism. A low or a normal serum LH and FSH level for early Tanner's staging. Under this, we'll again put it into two. Growth rate, if the growth rate is in the pre-pubertal range, that is, it could be due to GnRH deficiency or constitutional delay of growth in puberty. If the growth rate is below the pre-pubertal range, it is functional hypogonadotropic hypogonadism. It can be due to a secondary cause like a chronic disease, any eating disorders like anorexia or hypopituitarism. Now, the second line evaluation, which we will proceed, second line is done only if we are sure that it is not constitutional delay. Okay, now coming to the second line, in case of hypergonadotropic hypogonadism, we have to examine further for the underlying cause, get a karyotyping done, and if there is a Y gonad, gonadectomy has to be done, and further support with sex steroids, treatment with sex steroids. In case of functional hypogonadotropic hypogonadism, we have to examine further and look for any chronic diseases, if existing, MRI of the brain, and serum prolactin levels. Going further, we will also check the BMI levels. If there is normal BMI, it can be due to hyperprolactinemia, growth hormone deficiency. If there is high BMI, it can be due to glucocorticoid excess, iatrogenic or Cushing syndrome, or hypothyroidism. In case of low BMI, we can suspect eating disorders, anorexia, not eating properly, or other GI disorders like Crohn's and IBD, inflammatory bowel diseases. For this, we have to treat the underlying cause. Coming to the GnRH deficiency or constitutional delay, GnRH test has to be done, serum inhibin B levels, olfactory function test to see if there is any anosmia in case of Kallmann syndrome, a genetic testing, and MRI head. All of this we have to follow, evaluate the need for the induction of secondary sexual characters, and once we segregate them into these classes and narrow down on the cause, the treatment of the following will be accordingly. Thank you so much. I hope I've been able to help you with understanding puberty, the various changes, and understanding how to evaluate a case of delayed puberty. Just a little bit about myself. I'm Dr. Pallavi Vishwanath. Completed my MS OBGY from Dr. D.Y. Patil Hospital, Pimpri, Pune. Currently, I'm a senior resident in Juhi Fertility Center, Hyderabad. I will be joining my fellowship in reproductive medicine in Bombay under Dr. S. Krishna Kumar. Here's my email ID and my contact number. Please do reach out in case of any queries. Thank you so much.